have no quarrel with the ordinary British people. We continue to respect the Queen. It's those in number 10 Downing Street. The demons in number 10 Downing Street must be exorcised by someone.
This was Robert Mugabe's first attempt to give a Western film crew access all areas. My English accent made those closest to Mugabe suspicious.
Just had what I would consider a pretty major car accident.
The march of the century for the greatest and the dearest leader.
Zimbabwe is for Zimbabweans. It cannot be for the Americans. It cannot be for the British.
It was very unfortunate how they disengaged. And I'm talking now about the new Labour government declared that they are a new party without a colonial past to answer for. And even as white Zimbabweans, we were horrified at that.
Then came in this crook called Blair, saying, no, we are not going to pay you anything.
When we reclaimed our land from these white people, Britain, America, and the EU were not amused.
Because they knew they were wrong. They thought of how they can punish this man, dictator called Mugabe.
Terrorism is about the destruction of life. Sanctions, in our case, have caused the destruction of life.
And these sanctions must be removed. You are killing people. You are not killing Robert Mugabe.
They're selling media, yes, they're printing more papers in England, whatever cases, because they're publishing all the bullshit about what's going on in Zimbabwe, but they're not telling the truth. They're not showing us the true story of what's happening in our country.
But maybe then they should come into the country and then they can tell the truth.
Here we have a president, a man of principle, a man who has stood up against all and said Zimbabwe to the Zimbabweans.
Finally, after 2 years, we got the call to interview the president.
Shindi, Sakpe, Neruene.
You know I'm going to throw that back at you, Jeff. So I can show a raise of hands, really. Mugabe, villain.
House.
And so that's 1, 2, 2. Mugabe, hero. Undecided? Undecided, okay, all right.
But I'd say this, I mean, because what a lot of you are doing is skirting around the issues. You know what I mean? It's like there's certain people you want to say, and you say, here's a fact. None of you would sit on a jury and only hear the case for the prosecution. Yeah? So when we were making this film, that's the thing that engaged me. Yeah? It was nothing to do with colour. The one thing about being a Brit, we've got a sense of fair play. So if someone reneges on a deal, which Lancaster House was a deal, and Mugabe kept his end. Yeah? So it doesn't matter what you think about Mugabe, for me, it was about the deal. So, if you then take the deal and then go, there was a deal done and the British government reneged, yeah, on that deal. Now, if you look at it, you go, well, what do you expect him to do? Because the reason why I respected him is he didn't roll over. And that's what the perception was, yeah? And when Roy was there, he's supposed to be there for 3 months, yeah? And this whole project's taken over 5 years by the time he got it back, etc., etc. But the thing that drove me was, one, Roy's commitment, to stay on the ground for 3 years. The reason why it's such a good documentary is because none of the others thought there'd be a black man with a camera when all this bullshit was going on. Yeah? So I'm saying come home because I'm watching CNN and Sky and they're giving this image of, you know what I mean, there's civil war basically going on and people are dying in the streets. I'm saying to Roy, look, forget the money, come home. Yeah, it isn't worth that. And he's going, I'm sitting by a pool, it's not what you're seeing. So I've just said, that's your story. Let's just go and tell that. Now, based on you wouldn't sit on a jury and only hear the case for the prosecution, that's how, when we started doing the edit. And one of the funny things was, when Roy came back with the rushes and we got into the edit and we started doing it, we had this editor and he was putting it together, and then I came in the edit with Roy and I was going, no, it's got to be harder than that, this is crap, you know what I mean? Let's do it hard. Within a week, the editor was on it. He absolutely crashed himself. He was going, well, MI5 would be following me, and all this sort of shit. Yeah? And that was the propaganda. Well, for me, the biggest buzz I got out of the film was when you all put your hands up. Yeah? Because that's what it was about. Villain or hero, make your own mind up. And the fact was, there was also, I like the fact that it's a mixed audience. Yeah? Because this is about right and wrong more than black and white. Yeah? So if you do it along that basis, when the woman at the back, the white woman's went, well, you didn't show, I mean, I hear that, but what you've got to remember is, for the last 15 years, what you see what I mean? You're not seeing the other side, and it's not all the dark. Yeah? Thank you very much.
Okay, so the lady is asking about something that was touched on in the film. Should other countries in places in Africa go ahead with the land reform, and will it ever be possible to have a United States of Africa? So, Roy.
No, definitely. I think, of course, neighbouring countries will look at Zimbabwe's method of the land redistribution, and when they'll look at what worked and what didn't work. I'm sure they don't want a situation whereby if they embark on their land reform program, then they're going to have hyperinflation go up to 89-60%. So they don't want to go down that road. But conversations are obviously being had. A lot of South Africans saying it's not happening quick enough. But that's the biggest issue on the continent at the moment. Certainly within Southern Africa, the redistribution of wealth. How do you do that? We talk about Africans, being poor because you have a small group of people owning all the wealth. And so, yes, that's the challenge. How do you redistribute that wealth? And how do you keep the wolves at bay? Because, you've got a whole load of people banging on the door wanting those resources. And so, it always comes down to African leadership, for me, is how strong they can be to kind of keep them at bay. And people, to divert in a little bit, people bringing in China. I think China has been positive in one aspect, because it gives the African leaders a bit of a bargaining tool, like, all right, the West, you've been offering this for so long, now China are offering this, what you got? And so it comes down to the strength of the new leaders. But Mugabe really himself said recently, he fears for the continent at the moment. He said there needs to be a revolution to revolutionise the current leaders themselves, because he feels that they're kneeling at the doors of the West, asking them for help. And what they do is give, as he says, crumbs, humanitarian aid here and there, but no real assistance to help build factories, which I have to say China is doing in some areas of the continent. But yes, there's a great deal of criticism of, say, China on the continent. But all in all, I think if the leadership is strong enough, then they can utilise China's entry into Africa.
I've been seeing all this mainstream media to promote just negative stuff about Africa. What can we do to promote the good thing about Africa?
Did everyone hear the question? Okay, as Africans anywhere in the world, and particularly here, what can we, not me obviously, but we as Africans here, is there anything we can do to further promote this better view of what's going on? Roy?
It's down to Africans, first and foremost. you can look at the media over the last, say, 100 years and you think, okay, the Western media have portrayed Africa in a certain way. But African leaders need to realise that it's their time to have a fund to say, okay, well, let's sponsor filmmakers who can tell much more of a balanced view. And so I think really African leaders, African entrepreneurs, the private sector need to stand up and say, okay, well, let's readdress the balance, because it helps us. It helps us in the way that the West engages with us, because they're seeing different images of Africa rather than the usual images of Africa, which means, okay, well, we're dealing with Africa, they're beggars, we're going to just give them that. So I think it's really down to people like Neville of Jamaican Heritage and other individuals, not just Africans, because there are other people other than Africans that tell certain stories, but I do think the onus certainly is Africa, because a whole load of money down on the continent. They just need to realise that, you know, media is important in changing certain perceptions.
That's a good question. Oh yes, the lady was asking if the film had been made about Kobe, would he perhaps have got better distribution deals and more distribution as opposed to the Mugabe?
Well, the people that like the film understand why I may not get love from certain arenas. And, you know, there's been other Mugabe films out there that have been put together structurally really, really well, but tell a kind of Mugabe the villain.
Yes.
And they get a lot of play, they get a lot of love, but yet they miss out whole great aspects of, for example, Lancaster House, which I feel is critical.
Absolutely.
Yet, you know, there's certain films that win awards around the world, and yet they're not telling the greater story. So we'll see who comes knocking on our door with regards to showing this film.
Okay, gentleman here with the hat.
Yes, excellent documentary, and congratulations to you and Neville and so on. I just want to say that our land in Africa was not taken through the courts. Our people were murdered and our land stolen. And as Marcus Garvey said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. Africa belongs to us. No apology to anyone where that is concerned.
So that was the question, how much of the aid or help actually is getting to the people and not just going into the government coffers?
I mean, it's a loaded question, and there's a load of tentacles off that, but you're talking to a guy who's on the west coast of Ghana, so when it comes to corruption, I certainly know what it looks like. Zimbabwe, if I'm really perfectly honest with you, the corruption thing is mild in comparison to a lot of other areas. With regards to kind of the aid, I think aid is an important question, especially when the land reform happened, because usually NGOs are there to help the poor, right? But they were told by their governments not to help the resettled farmers because it worked against them. And so the relationship between aid agencies and Zimbabwe is fractured anyway. So when the Chinese come in, as Mugabe said, the Chinese come in and they offer a plan where they build it on infrastructure and schools and roads, whereas the aid agencies soak up their money for their own purposes, in some instances, for their own purposes, and doesn't really reach the poor. What I didn't say within the film, which happened in Zimbabwe, was a lot of the aid agencies were bribing a lot of the villagers. So some of my friends, most of my friends actually follow MDC. Some of them were kind of hired to go into the rural areas and say, if you vote for Mugabe, we're not coming back. And so there's all this stuff that goes on that we never hear about. And so when ZANU-PF retaliates against that, that's what we hear about. And then it's human rights abuses and it's all that. I think the interference causes a whole load of friction. Really, the interference, Western interference, causes a whole load of friction. And part of the reason, that's how a lot of these abuses come about, in my view anyway.
Thank you very much, Roy. Thank you very much indeed for your resilience. I admire you for that. My name is Munoda. I have relocated to Zimbabwe, right? And the reality on the ground is that there is a new social class of whites who have now retracted into very cozy, very comfortable suburban areas and still perpetuating apartheid kind of segregation. And these are evidenced by the way in which they control the so-called Group A schools in form of their PTAs, the Parents Teachers Association, who are predominantly all whites, right? And I want to warn, right, my fellow progressive Zimbabweans that Britain has not moved away from Zimbabwe.
Thank you, sir.
If at all, their efforts which they are making, as evidenced by the call for dialogue, is a strategic way of getting back to Zimbabwe because of its mineral resources.
Sure.
Yeah? And I must also point out that it will be worthwhile for you to extend, this part of the film as part 2 by focusing on how the Zimbabwean people have now regrouped, the indigenous people have now regrouped in order to reclaim their rightful resources. And the last point is that the whites at the moment and the international community are calling for the tenure of land to be ratified. Right. Now what this means is that they want the land to be title deeded, to have title deeds on the land. And we are cognizant of the fact that they are making inroads through the back door where they are going to buy back that land, yeah, through secure tenureship in form of title deeds. And we should be careful about that.
Well, that's fantastic, because that's coming from someone on the ground. So thank you very much for that. Now, if I can go to the lady that was desperate to ask the question. There you are, yes.
My question could purely be bred out of ignorance, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. As a white sort of British person with no sort of connections historically with Africa or anything, how do you feel, personally, going into this? Did you feel that you were British going into it and you felt more Ghanaian coming out of it as an identity? How did you feel your identity changed as an individual, after all of that, if at all?
Good question. That's a really good question. Growing up with Ghanaian heritage, in the UK, Africans were always at the bottom of the tree. So you had the English, the Irish, Caribbean islands, and then the Africans. And that was one of the reasons that spurred me on actually to get on television, to show people, you know what, there's a lot more to us Africans than being killed by Tarzan. And so that was important in terms of my own progression within the media. Going out to Zimbabwe, yes, I was in tune with my African roots, but it did actually help me connect more with my African roots, spending a lot more time there, because I've never lived in an African country as long as I did in Zimbabwe. So listening to the stories and actually seeing the struggles that they went through, the inflation, the shortages of basic food commodities, when you're around that, you kind of see the African spirit. And the Zimbabweans are so resilient. And that's why I look at it. Yes, it was a struggle for me out there, but nothing in comparison to what they went through. So it was almost, you know what, I need to give back by doing this documentary, because you guys have suffered a hell of a lot more than I have making this film. So yes, I reconnected stronger because of just seeing that fighting kind of spirit. Yes, and I've come out of it a hell of a more African. No question about that.
I'm sorry to cut everybody short, but the very cool gentleman with just a finger up. You.
It's just a really basic and quick question. Are you aware of whether or not Mugabe has seen your documentary, or anyone in his inner circle, if they've seen it, and how they feel? What feedback have you got about that?
But the key person would be the president. I mean, by all accounts, more I can gauge. I know I've been in the local kind of newspapers and opposition papers and pro-government papers, and it's been reported quite fairly. But no, I don't know what he thinks of the film as yet.
Okay, so please be nice to me. I'm honestly doing my best, but I will have to wind up soon. This gentleman here, and then we're going to just bring Neville back to round off. So apologies in advance if I've missed anyone out, but time has once again beaten us. So this gentleman here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Roy, for the movie. I think it's brilliant. But I think I must also indicate one thing that I think we're missing here, particularly African, black indeed. I heard you, what you were saying, Comrade. Sorry, I don't know your name. Yeah, I didn't hear your name, but I'm also referring to what you were responding. I think there's one thing we must understand. Africa has democratical states, which democrats alone accept black and white. So when we watch the movie, we must also think about where we are and where we come from. We are also living in the United Kingdom. There are white people in this country who never wanted to accept our grandparents. But today we are. And we are living here. And we had the opportunity to watch a movie about our country, where we come from. So we must also accept what is happening, but we must also be aware of where we come from. And try to address these challenges in a way forward that embrace one another. I'm not supporting what was happening in Zimbabwe. I really respect President Mugabe. I've met him several times as a South African youth leader. We accept the land reform, but we don't endorse the brutality of one another.
Very good, very well done. I'll take one more quick question.
It looks as if you edited, you shot with different medium.
Yeah, yeah.
Did that offer you any sort of challenge, and did you edit in country or back here?
No, absolutely. So it's 80% high definition, and at the time I was using one of those big bulky HD cam 790p, the huge cameras, and running around the country, which was really, really hot during the summer, was just kind of unbearable. So I took along a Z1, and so that was much more mobile, much more rugged, and I could film a lot of the rallies. We started the edit here in the UK, and actually ended up finishing the edit in Kenya, where Ash Jenkins, who's a real big editor, he sold his company in Soho, moved to Kenya and said, "You want me to finish this film? Come to Kenya and cut it." And so I spent 2.5 months in Kenya finishing the film, which was great.
That everybody in this room, whether you're black or white, or from whatever other part of Africa you may come from, if Mugabe fails, Africa can kiss goodbye. Okay? That's a fact. That's not even a joke, that's a fact. Right? Now, at the end of the day, all my personal opinion, when we went and someone said to me, Mugabe, villain or hero, I was that juror in court only hearing one side. So I only really I thought he was a villain. Yeah? Seeing the other side with Roy on the ground and what we've seen, yeah? I think he's a hero. I totally respect him for having the balls to stand up and say no. Yeah? Virtually unheard of in Africa these days. Yeah? So, in real terms, land reform has to happen. Yes. The next election needs to happen without sanctions. And the reason for that is I would love, in my lifetime, to see an election in Africa with the West taking their noses out of the trough, and just for us to look at it and say, can an African country run itself, do an election itself, without any interference? And based on that, we'll know whether Africa as a continent can stand on its own 2 feet. And it's as simple as that.
Can I just thank Shira and once again help me to thank Roy and Neville. Thank you so
much. My name is Munoda Mararike. I'm now relocated to Zimbabwe and living in Zimbabwe after a decade of economic problems. Just to make a comment about the film itself is very good. I applaud the team for their resilience in terms of getting the information, in terms of getting the right people to understand why they were in Zimbabwe. And as a way forward, I would like Roy and his team to go into Zimbabwe once again and make a follow-up, flag out a lot of issues that emanated from the film. For example, they can follow up on how Comrade Robert Mugabe has gone on to redistribute as an advocate of indigenization, redistribute the resources in the mines, in the industries, in terms of the companies, and that's exactly why this film is important. It gives us the leverage to make a follow-up on issues that are of paramount importance at the moment. Thank you.
I'm an activist, and I have seen a powerful movie that has put into perspective the condition of Africa, the motherland. Mugabe was spoken about in such an honourable way, and I am honoured and feel very privileged to be here to hear the truth be spoken about such a great leader. Thank you.
My name is Kwame, and I'm so proud of what I just saw, and I cannot express how happy I am. I've actually been to Zimbabwe, and I was trying to even get an interview with Mr. Mugabe, not being of any political status. So what I want to see is for us to come together and make movies like these and try to support Mr. Mugabe in everything that he does, right? Because we know, right, there's a direct plot from the West to try and destroy Mr. Mugabe, and we know what we need to do and what we shouldn't do. And I also want one of the reporters to find out how we can make some preparation to return to Zimbabwe and help to build up that country, because there's a lot of us in this country who have no hope in this society, and we could be better off in Zimbabwe doing something to help that country. That's all I want to say right now. Thanks for your time. Bless.
I have just watched the documentary, Mugabe, Villain or Hero. Excellent documentary. And President Mugabe is a hero. This is the only documentary in the world that has been done to counteract the lies of the racist European imperialist media, who have been waging a campaign of lies and disinformation against President Mugabe and ZANU-PF since 1997, when Tony Blair, the war criminal, went back on the agreement of the Lancaster House. I am saying this as an African from Jamaica. My name is Mandingo. I am a journalist, and Marcus Messiah Garvey, the world's greatest Pan-Africanist leader who inspired Kwame Nkrumah and others, is my political and ideological leader. And what is good about this project is that it took Neville Hendricks, an African from Jamaica, his parents are from Jamaica, to produce this film, and Roy Agyemang, an African, his parents are Ghanaian, to come together to do this African film. It shows African unity in motion. Two Africans born in Britain, parents from Jamaica, parents from Ghana, doing a documentary on another African, President Mugabe from Zimbabwe. This is what Marcus Messiah Garvey told us we should do. Not only talk African unity, but practice African unity. It is our only salvation. Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will, said Marcus Garvey. And the only argument that satisfies man is power, Marcus Garvey also said. And finally, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. So said Marcus Messiah Garvey, the world's greatest Africanist leader. And respect and praises to President Mugabe of Zimbabwe, because currently he is the only African head of state who publicly denounces and resists the attacks of the racist European imperialists. All power to President Mugabe. From I, Mandingo, the Pan-Africanist, the Garveyite.
I just want to say, finally, somebody has made a film to address the balance
And I would like to echo what my brother Mandingo said, Africa for Africans, and long live Mugabe.
Once you strip through the layers of security ministers, you see Mugabe. He's a very humble, quite ordinary man.
Yeah.
Got a lot of aura around him. Very funny. He can communicate with young, old, black or white. Had a real connection with Ghana.
Right, yeah.
Obviously his first wife is a Ghanaian. His idol was Kwame Nkrumah.
Yeah.
And so we click like that. But as a leader, you also got to have that way about you. He doesn't mess about, of course. Just very strong character.
Now, the question is, I've always been asking, and I've asking on the actually theater, what can we do as African movie makers? What can we do to promote the good about Africa? Because all the time we just see the mainstream media trying to promote the bad image about Africa, which is poverty, which is violence. What can we do to promote love in our own continent and then be ourselves telling our story rather than wait other people to tell our own story?
I think it all comes down to making films is not easy, but it is easier as technology becomes much more accessible. Yeah. But it also costs money to make films, because you want to make films that people want to watch, that technically it's made in the right way.
Absolutely.
And so therefore you need funding. And with that funding, we need to look at a broader scope of people. I think African leaders, African private sector entrepreneurs also need to step up to the plate and say, do you know what? For 100 years, the West has perpetuated a certain image of Africa. Yeah. So Africans now need to take media seriously and think, okay, let's tell our own stories. And so therefore they need to step up to the plate and think we need to take this media perception, image a lot more seriously, and by that they can help fund filmmakers like ourselves.
Yeah. The other thing as well, the British audience, what's their point of view? What you get? What are you get from the British viewer about this actually documentary? What do you get about the British side of it?
Screened it twice. Obviously tonight at the Riverside and the BFI, the British Film Institute, and so far the reception has been brilliant. So we'll wait to hear what the press say, but whatever said, it's not going to stop the cause. I've been shown a hell of a lot of love here in the UK, and as long as I get it to the people that are interested in watching it, and particularly Africans in the diaspora, who sometimes are not aware of what's going on inside the continent because they're hearing it from the Western media. So I'm just trying to present an alternative view of Africa by using Robert Mugabe as a prism to look at the continent.
You think the Mugabe's policy will be spread all over Africa?
I think so. I think African for Africans is right. I think the empowerment of the Africans is needed across the continent. Being in Zimbabwe, you walk along the street and people really feel empowered. The ownership of the land, the chance that they could own the resources, or broaden the ownership of resources. And I think that's an empowering thing, and you would hope that spreads across the continent.
Wow. I want to say to you, I'm doing my best to actually promote throughout Manchester as well, which is I came from Manchester, but also to show to my own country, because I'm originally from Angola. I'm from Angola, and then it's really inspired to see you guys doing the great stuff, promoting. You're not from Zimbabwe as well.
So. No, absolutely. Born here in the UK of Ghanaian heritage, proud Ghanaian. And so I felt like my ancestors really telling me, no, continue, persevere. This is an important story, not just for you as a filmmaker, but also for the Africans in the diaspora, and also for those who have a particular interest in Africa and wanted to know an alternative view.
Absolutely, because my own country is been known about corruption, about oils, and a lot of things going on over there, and then it really sometimes I feel so ashamed of we as African people here in the UK. We not really do much to promote our country. What do you think about it, though?
Absolutely, but the onus is on us to change perceptions and tell stories that you don't have to tell positive stories. It's just much more balanced, because the more positive imagery that we see of Africa, the more that helps change the mindset of people that engage with us. Right. And so I think that's really, really important.
Once again, I wanted just to send a last message to not just for all African people, but especially as well the video makers, because there's a lot of video makers out there who are trying to get into the video industry, but they don't know how. And then your perseverance, because you've been 3 years alone in Zimbabwe trying to make this happen, because you fight for what you actually believed. So I just wanted to send a message to all African brothers and sisters, and especially the video makers as well. What can we do to promote our country, our continent?
First of all, I know you've come all the way from Manchester, and for people who don't know, it's a hell of a long way to come and watch the screening here. So I thank you for your perseverance, and by you coming down shows me how much passion you have within yourself to tell a more balanced and less distorted view of the continent. So I say to you, keep up the good work, let's keep up the connection, let's make this go viral, because it's important that our friends, brothers and sisters within the diaspora and also within Africa know about this film. So I say to you, thanks very much for the love and support that you're showing me. Keep up the good work.
Once again, my brother Roy, I want to say thank you as well to give me the blessing to be here. It's such an unbelievable time we had together to show the Africa we still the continent that we're planning to be on. And then once again, I appreciate for your help, and then really thank you as well, and keep up a good work, bro.
One love.
Well, right.
When we reclaimed our land from these white people, Britain, America, and the EU were not amused.
Because they knew they were wrong. They thought of how they can punish this man, dictator called Mugabe.
Terrorism is about the destruction of life. Sanctions, in our case, have caused the destruction of life.
And these sanctions must be removed. You are killing people. You are not killing Robert Mugabe.
They're selling media, yes, they're printing more papers in England, whatever cases, because they're publishing all the bullshit about what's going on in Zimbabwe, but they're not telling the truth. They're not showing us the true story of what's happening in our country.
But maybe then they should come into the country and then they can tell the truth.
Here we have a president, a man of principle, a man who has stood up against all and said, Zimbabwe to the Zimbabweans.
Finally, after 2 years, we got the call to interview the president.
Cindy, Sakpe, Neruenen. Take it!